Welcome to another edition of Fall, Rise, Give. Turn struggles into opportunities by being your true self and help others. I'm one of your hosts, Bartender Bob. The other host, of course, is my good friend Kumar. The joyful thing about today is that we have an opportunity to introduce a new guest, and it's somebody that you've had meetings with before, correct?
Yeah, I've known her for about a year, a little bit longer than a year. So yeah, I'm really excited to have her on, and love her passion, love her strength and wisdom. From day one when I was attending the Attitude Adjustment Program, she was there. And so yeah, it's really cool to get her on the show.
Well, let's introduce her. Erica, good morning. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Erica, and I'm from a small town. I'm a wife and a mother. I'm a business owner. I love to help people, and I'm just really grateful today to be sober and to be able to be grateful for the life that I live, and to be able to keep up with all of the wonderful things that I do have in my life today, because it wasn't always like that. And so that's where I'm at.
You mentioned the word grateful, and Kumar and I have spoke about being grateful many times throughout the last half year of doing the podcast. Why are you grateful?
You know, Bob, I spent a lot of years taking God's gifts for granted. And, I come from a background, I come from a family that where I wasn't always, I was not, and I'm going to say this in kind of broad term, like there wasn't abuse in my family that the people would say is like typical abuse. I was never beaten. I was never SA'd. I was never neglected, things like that. But, I come from a family where my father was a fugitive from the law. I lived in South America for 6 months when I was 13 because my father was on the lam, so we lived an outlaw lifestyle, and it was very up and down and very not steady. And, and so as I grew up and I got older and I wanted to build this life, I just would tell myself that I wanted a white picket fence. I wanted a white picket fence. I wanted safety and stability, and I wanted to have a home and be married and own a business. And I wanted, to have a wonderful partner in my life. And the truth is I got all of that. I got all of that. And then through the progression that is our disease, I was burning my white picket fence to the ground. I was burning it to the ground because alcohol wasn't a problem for me in the beginning, like when I was late teens, early 20s, like I could pick it up, put it down, it wasn't a problem until it became a problem. And I was very much a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde drinker. The people that paid for my alcoholism was my family, my husband, my beautiful children. And so today, the fact that I made it through my active alcoholism and through early recovery, because let's be real, that shit ain't no picnic, right? Like the fact that I made it through and I still have that white picket fence, I have to be grateful. I have to be grateful. And I made a promise that I would never, ever take God's gifts for granted again. And so every day I get to count my blessings, and I say I get to count my blessings because they are bountiful.
You mentioned that you were hurting your loved ones. It seems like we as a society hurt the ones that we love probably the most, because they're the ones that are closest to us, and they're the ones that are seeing us in and out of our struggles each and every day. And we probably push stuff onto them that doesn't need to be pushed onto them, but we do just because that's who we are as people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm real good in a room, right? I'm born. I was a born extrovert, man. I always tease that I was born with a microphone in my hand. I feel most comfortable, when I'm in a room full of people, like-minded people. Generally, it was with a drink in my hand. I'm super sociable. I've always been that kind of outgoing. I always tease Bob that I was born with the heart of a cheerleader, but the body of a mascot, right? So that kind of environment is where I really thrive in. And, the truth of the matter is that when I first got pregnant with my first son, a lot of fear started to enter into my world, right? I had this beautiful baby, and then soon a second beautiful baby. There was like pieces of my heart had grown legs and was wandering around outside of my body. And the world became a very scary, scary place. And all of that like crap from my childhood came flooding in, things that I had never dealt with, right? And so I just really started to want to hide away from fear. I mean, I was hiding from fear. And, I think it's prudent to say, like, my first addiction, I can look back over the course of my life and I know that I have alcoholic thinking. I say all the time, right? I can be drunk, Erica, without drinking a drop. Alcohol was never my problem. It was my solution. My problem centers in my damn mind. And that's just all there is to it, because left to my own devices, I'm going to hide in fear as if it were an emotion, and then everything comes out from that self-pity, self-centeredness. And I'm going to manipulate and try to control situations to try to protect myself. And, that run rampant is very dangerous, right, for any of us. And for me, it was all happening and I didn't even realize that that's what it was, and I've always been one to try to seek to be better, to try to empower my mind. I have a million self-help books. I've been to therapy over the years, but like all those self-help books have wine stains on the pages. I had to get out of my own way, right? I had to learn that I had this way of thinking that put myself in the center of everything. And, I have an incredibly amazing husband. I mean, I have to give a shout out to Recovery for Families, because, one thing we learn is alcoholism is very much a family disease. And I think that, there were things in place that helped him deal with me being an alcoholic, because while my world was crazy and alcoholism was kind of part of it, growing up, his is not. His parents are high school sweethearts getting ready to celebrate 50 years of marriage, and they're only going to be 70, so like he comes from this, beautiful family, and he's a super normie, right? Like booze is not, and it just, when he was ready to walk out the door, I had the fear of losing my family is what ultimately drove me to trying something that I had never tried before. And that was realizing that I had a problem with alcohol, but I didn't know how to stop drinking. I did not know how to stop drinking. And I had, a friend who called me to the carpet, like only one alcoholic can do to another. And he had several years of really solid sobriety under his belt. And so it was that moment of clarity, when we talk about that a lot in recovery, that moment of clarity when someone, something, somewhere that, that thing that grabs you and says you're at a turning point and you have to figure it out, like you have to do this. And so I walked into my first recovery meeting, the next day. And that was almost 2.5 years ago. And, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned that there were dark parts of me that I had been running from my entire life. And I also learned that I hadn't really grown up emotionally beyond, my teenage years, which is, it was kind of like all the things that happened when I was a younger child. And then, I can almost remember I was thinking about this interview, kind of thinking about where like this shift happened. And, when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, my mom had remarried, life had settled down. And I was an only child till I was 15. And so my sisters were born when I was 15 and 17. And that changed a lot in my world, as far as like my home life, right? And I told myself that I didn't need to deal with it. I was super responsible. I could get through anything I could do. I always had that in the back of my mind. And then when I was drinking and my drinking had become every day, right? So I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but the thing about it that we learn is like our lives seem linear, but they're like recovery, like it's not linear, right? Sometimes it's like we have to jump around and look at different things and do different things. But they were a big part of like how my home life shifted, because my mother got a lot more settled. My stepfather is a great man, like they kind of had this little nuclear family going on, and I was kind of aging out of the house, right? So I was a teenager. I was full of teenage angst. I did not make anything any easier. And then I move out, and I'm like this super hyper independent, type A, I'm going to do it myself kind of girl. And then in my early 20s, I actually got in trouble with the law for the exact same kind of things that my father used to do. And I think if I had like any turning point in my life where it's like, okay, like they say, sometimes you're looking at things and it's like there's now a before and an after. And that was a pivot point for me where I suddenly had a lot of shame around who I was, what I'd done, who I didn't want to be. And instead of getting the help that I really needed, I, of course, went to my doctor. I was like 24 and, oh, you're depressed. Here, let's give you some antidepressants, like, okay, sure. And so I start my first round of antidepressants, and yeah, like things were better. And I started, going to the gym and like renewing my life. And it was right after, that a year later, I met my husband, and like life went on, and we were together, for 4 years, and we built this business. I went back to school. We built this business. We got married. We bought a home. We started having babies, and like life happens all of, kind of. And then it was like in 2018, 2019, was when, and I can think about this before and after too, is like, that's when I started drinking at home. And I had gone from, it being a social, just being out with friends, a couple times during the week, to a glass of wine at night, because I was an overworked mom and I deserved to relax. And then pretty soon a glass of wine turned into 2, which turned into a bottle, which turned into, alcohol being a regular line item on my grocery list. I remember going within a year, I went from, a bottle of champagne on a Sunday to buying a case at Costco and needing to go back and get more. And then March of 2020 happened, and holy shit, my illusion of anything like got shattered. My control went out the window. All my fears came rolling in, and I went from, a couple glasses, a bottle here and there, to waking up in the morning and drinking shots of whiskey at 10:30 in the morning. And it was overnight, you guys. And I did not know. I did not know what was happening to me. All I knew is that I was the most afraid I had ever been in my entire life. And how could I be so afraid? Because I am this badass bitch, right? How could Erica be this afraid? This is not who I am. This is not what I want. I am strong. I am tough. I can handle anything. And mind you, I was curled up in a ball on the closet of my floor, or on the floor of my closet, drinking and crying, hiding from everything. And at first it was like a real big party. Social media. I would do like driveway drinks, and I'd make a big deal about putting chairs out in my driveway and measuring out 6 feet, so we could all come over. what? Like it was a thing. But it just really went from 0 to 90 in 2.2 seconds. And so I remember the day. So like I said, my friend called me out. And then that night, it was a Tuesday. That evening after work, I went to another friend's place and we had this work thing. And normally, the girls were going to have a drink, we're going to do this work thing. And I show up and I'm like, where's the wine? After this like whole epiphany thing had happened, I was still going to drink. And she's like, oh, I don't really feel like drinking, but here I have an open bottle of red if you want to have glass. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Well, what I realized is that not only did I drink a glass out of that open bottle of red, but I killed that open bottle of red and nobody was drinking with me. I was the only one that was drinking. And then, of course, at the end of the work thing, I get in my truck and I'm driving home because that's what we do as alcoholics. We think we can handle anything no matter what. And as I'm driving from her house to my house, I had to drive by the liquor store that was my stop. If you're an alcoholic, you generally have your stop or more than one sometimes. And I remember thinking, it was as clear as day. I remember thinking, oh, you've only had a couple glasses of wine. You could stop at the store and you could grab, another 12 pack and go home and make dinner. And I had this, as I'm driving, I had this voice in my head say, Erica, go home and make the chicken. Because that morning I had taken chicken out of the freezer to make dinner for my family. And at that point, I don't know how many, I had lost track of the days where I had woken up not remembering if I had made dinner the night before. And so it was like this clarity moment for me where it was like this voice in my head just said, go home and make the chicken. Because I knew in my heart that if I stopped at the store, I wouldn't have made the chicken. And I wouldn't have remembered even trying. And I don't know how many mornings I woke up with this realization that I didn't remember the night before. And the first thought every single time, you guys, the first thought in my brain every single time was, Erica, what if you had burned the fucking house down? Excuse me. Sorry for my French, but that was the thought. That was the thought. That was, and that still didn't stop me. And I'm shaken, right? I'd wake up with that thought and I'd be shaking and I'd look at my husband and I'd try to be really coy, try to be like, cause I wanted to know, like, did you guys get dinner done? Or, I try to be really coy about the fact that I didn't remember. And so I'm driving home and this little voice says, Erica, go home and make the chicken. And you know what, you guys? I went home and I made the chicken. And the next morning I woke up and I was shaken. Oh God, was I shaken. But I remembered making the chicken. And I remember sitting at the table with my family and I remember eating it. And I even remember doing the dishes after. And that afternoon, at noon, was the first time I walked into a recovery meeting. And when I walked through those doors, like literally it was like, I had felt like I was standing on a burning boat in the middle of the ocean, right? Like it was like I was standing there and I was burning that white picket fence. I was burning that boat to the ground and I was in the middle of the ocean and I was so afraid to jump off of the boat. But I knew that I had a choice. Like if I stayed on the boat, I was going to perish with the boat. Or I could just jump and figure it out, right? And so in that moment of like clarity, it was like, Erica, be the person that you claim that you are. Like be that strong chick that can do anything, jump. And that was really like what I felt like walking through that door, and what I found, and I believe in my heart that it doesn't matter what kind of recovery meeting type thing you go to. Number one, we can't do this alone. And number two, like it was like coming home for me. Like I walked into a room of people that held me when I was a crying, shaking mess, and they told me it was going to be okay. At a time when I did not, nothing was okay. Nothing was okay. And they, more than that, they were able to say, like, we get it. We were there. We are with you. We understand, and that was the thing is, like, when I say my friend called me out as only one alcoholic can do to another alcoholic, like, there is a kindredness in there's a connection. There's like this thing that when you're ready, right? When we're ready to hear, like, it gets you, it grabs you. And it's for me, right? I always have to remember, like, this is for me, right? Like, it pulled me in a way that I was not prepared for. And all those beautiful people, they let me float for a while. They let me float, and they let me cry, and they let me spew my self-pity, because that's what it was, right? Like, they let me spew that self-pity all over the place, and they told me it's going to be okay. And then, you know what they did, which was one of the best things they could have done for me, is they said, okay, you've floated for a while now. It's time to start swimming. But don't worry, we're going to swim right here next to you.
Let me ask you something based on that then, because
Yes,
it sounds like you can hear your struggle, and I can see it in your face that that it is a struggle for you to to even recall some of those things. But since you've quit drinking, how has your life flourished since then?
Oh man, well, it's that swimming. It took some time. Again, the grace of God was given to me in that I was able to fully embrace recovery. I had a beautiful husband who was there to support me the whole way. And, I think really, like, how has my life flourished? Well, I get to show up as a sober woman of integrity today. I tell my kids all the time that integrity is who we are when no one is watching. And I am the same person to the world that I am at home. And that is really important to me.
Right. Well, that's to be your true self, right? I mean, to be your true self is important.
It is really important. And, and the thing is, Bob, is I, so to go back again, like, to that childhood, right? Like, because a lot of stuff stems, and until we give honor to certain things, we can't get past them. And I grew up in a home with an outlaw who, there was a lot of secrets. There was a lot of things that I could not tell people. I remember the first time I got in trouble for sharing a secret. I was 6. I was 6 years old, and I told the school bus driver that I could get I was so excited because I got my 3-wheeler back because the helicopters were gone. And just to give a little context to that, I've grown up in Humboldt County where, people think of the war on drugs. We think of inner cities. We think of, heroin, crack cocaine, Harlem, Compton. We think of gang activity. But here where I live, where I'm from, there's an entire generation of kids who grew up on marijuana farms, who grew up hiding from helicopters, who grew up with visions of SWAT teams kicking in our doors, and it was different. It was different than what people think of it, but it was still an entire generation of kids being in something that they can't control by people that were fighting their own demons, and so there was a lot of secrets and a lot of up and down and a lot of back and forth, and lying came very easy to me early on. And so today, like, how my life has flourished is like, yeah, I still have that white picket fence. I still have like I say, I have all of the gifts that God gave me. And the way it has flourished is that I don't take it for granted. I'm grateful for it. I show up as my most authentic self in all things that I do. I don't have to hide who Erica is, because you know what? For the first time, I'm okay with who she is.
I'm going to interject just for a second. This feeling of integrity in action, did you find yourself just being radically honest out of the blue? All of a sudden, you're like, you felt to be honest.
I feel like maybe, you know, for this alcoholic, it was a muscle that needed to be exercised. It really was. And, you know, the thing is it was funny is what I realized, you know, on the big things, I was actually pretty honest about most big things. I was a little white liar. I'd say the most random little white lies. Why? Because I wanted you to think I was cool, right? Like I wanted you to think I was cool. I wanted you to like me. Because I didn't like myself. So I had to make things up to try to try to feel okay. And it was funny. It was actually someone in one of my groups that said how he couldn't believe, you know, all these little white lies. He's like, I'll lie. I remember the look on his face. He was like, I'll lie even when I don't have to. And I was like, oh my God, that's me, right? Like one of the things we learn in recovery is we don't look for the differences, we look for the similarities. And so, you know, one of the things that I had to start with was like just stopping those little things and stopping those little white lies and realizing that, you know, I don't always have to have something to say. I don't always have to like be like, I can sit there and be quiet and it's going to be okay. And, you know, I can't control whether people like me or not, but I would rather them like me because I'm me and not because of some weird little thing.
Lie that you made up.
Yeah, some little lie. That's what it is. Like, call it what it is. It's a little lie, and they're the stupidest things. And it's like, you know, and I would lie to get myself out of trouble, or if I thought I was going to get in trouble, like I would start, you know. But again, I think part of that, you know, there's a big part of me that's like, is my, you know, like I say, I know that I am an alcoholic. I know that I think differently about things, but there's also a part of me that's like, how much of it was like a learned behavior, right? Because we've talked about how there was lots of secrets in my life, and so learning how to be honest about the bigger things was easier. It was more about those ego feeding pieces, right? That was where I had to really, and I remember there'd be times I'd say something and it'd be out of my mouth before my brain caught up. It was such a knee-jerk reaction. And I've looked at people after a minute and been like, you know what? I don't even know why I said that. It's not true. That's not true. And I'm sorry, you know, and I think that's the other thing I've learned too, that it took me a little bit to learn that it was okay to not be perfect, that I had that, you know, progress over perfection piece is so key, I think, in life, period. But like, you know, because there is no perfection if we're being truly rigorously honest. There's no such thing as perfection. But, and I had to get super honest with myself before I could be super honest with other people. Others.
Right.
And, you know, I had to stop telling myself the bullshit. And so now, like, you know, when I say like showing up, I just don't feel the need to like extrapolate. Is that the word I'm looking for? Like over explain, right? I think that's the other part of the lying and that honesty piece is like, I don't have to over explain, because I'd get to over explaining and then you know, stuff would start to tumble out of my mouth and, you know, just stuff like that. And, what feels the best part, the best feeling that comes out of that is I don't feel like I have to look over my shoulder. I don't feel like I have to remember the things that I said to people because I'm just telling the truth. So the truth is the truth.
So Erica, one of the things that you brought up a couple of different times is that God's gifts. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit or ask you a little bit about, you know, your higher power. It's one of the things that we've talked about multiple times on this show. And so what is your thoughts on higher power?
Oh man. Well, higher power. Well, thank goodness I have. I guess the big part for me is that, when I figured out that I was not in control, what is in control, right? Because it's a question that I battle with, and I come from a very sordid, like religious background, as far as like, I have one grandmother who's a Mormon. I have one grandmother who's a JW. My father was an outlaw. My mother was very much into astrology and nature. And I was born in the middle of hippiedom, like I really, really have like these nature roots, right? As far as like spirituality. And so what happened in early recovery, and they told me that I had to like find God, it's like, I was so mixed up about what God is or should be, that it took me a long time to settle into even being able to pray. And so at the advice of a friend, I just started with that serenity prayer. And what I learned is that, there's some places in this world that will tell you find God or else. But in the recovery community that I'm a part of, nowhere does it say find God or this isn't going to work for you. What it says is seek God. And seek means attempt to find. And so it's just really through starting small, believing in a power outside of myself. And that really started with, I can't control things. I had to let go of that. And just understanding that regardless of what we call it, where it comes from, or how you get there, there is a force and an energy around us, and that connects us, and it runs through us. And, for me, that's love. Now, the reason I say God's gifts and I use the term God is because it's short, simple, to the point. People know what I'm talking about. But my idea today of God is whatever I need to do to ground myself in remembering that I am not in control, and that there's a bigger plan out there. And that I don't need to know what it is. I just have to stay right here in this moment. And I do that through prayer and meditation. And I do that through a little bit of tarot reading. And I do that through a little bit of Bible reading. And I do that. I don't co-sign to any one thing. I just know that as long as I'm looking beyond myself, and I remember that fear is not real, that only love is real, and I look at things like that with love and gratitude and tolerance in my heart, then I can maintain my sobriety and I can feel okay in my skin.
What would be your biggest tip for people listening and people that are just starting out recovery, or people who don't know if they're alcoholics or not? A lot of people, I think, don't think they're alcoholics. They just think, hey, I just have a couple of drinks a day, what I call the mainstream drunk. What would be your tip for them to help become a better person, or just live a life that they want to live?
The biggest, this might come off a little loaded, but I think that the biggest tip is that it's not all about me. Like for me, I had to learn that the world did not revolve around me. I had to learn that I was my own worst enemy. And I had to get really honest about who I was at my core. And as far as like a tip goes, man, I guess that tip is we don't do this alone. Like there is community in recovery, and there's a lot of places that we can go today to find fellowship in recovery. And I know what works for me. And so seek and ye shall find. Like if you're curious, visit some of those places, read, and not just read the books. Because like I said, I read all the books. It didn't really work. Like I had to go meet the people. And, in my recovery program, they always say, don't worry, you try it, but we'll always refund your misery. Your misery will be refunded to you. So if it's really not for you, if sobriety and recovery is really not for you, don't worry. You'll get right back there. So.
I've heard that before, but that's awesome. We talk about sober curious, Bob and I have, and I think that's a great tip to be able to say, it's not all about you, and we will refund your misery if this doesn't work for you.
I do want to ask this question because we've asked every one of our guests this. Erica, how do you want to be known?
Oh gosh. Whew, Bob, coming in with the heat. How do I want to be known? I want to be known as someone who never gave up. I want to be known as the person who, even when society told her that it was okay, because that's really what, it's one of the reasons, Bob, I mentioned this before we came on, is how, I made a commitment to recover out loud. And that's because I feel like in today's world, there's a lot more people like me out there than there are Skid Row bums. And it does not take losing it all to make changes in your life. I just hope that if I'm known for anything, it's just for the girl that didn't give up, who knew what she wanted all along. And even when she was trying to burn it down, she had enough wherewithal to save it by saving herself. I want to be known for going home and making my chicken.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fall, Rise, Give, where we explore stories of resilience, growth, and giving back. If you enjoyed today's episode, please visit our website at www.fallrisegive.com. Also, consider subscribing to our podcast on your favorite platform and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you inspiring stories. Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, every fall is a chance to rise, and every rise is an opportunity to give. Until next time, keep falling, rising, and giving. This is Fall, Rise, Give, produced by podcastforhire.com. Thank you for listening.